Hi, I'm Lorene. At a family party, my sister laughed and called me too poor for dessert. They sat me near the restroom. My name wasn't even on the place card, but what they didn't know was that I owned the property they were all clapping about. It wasn't the first time they tried to write me out, but this time I brought receipts. Why do the people closest to us rewrite our stories until we stop letting them? It was supposed to be a celebration. At least, that's how Mom pitched it. Just a nice family dinner, she said over the phone, her voice all sunshine and silk, like we hadn't spent the last decade pretending I was some awkward cousin instead of her youngest daughter. I knew better than to expect warmth, but I didn't expect the napkin. The hostess guided me past the main table, past the polished oak center spread with white hydrangeas and linen napkins, until we reached a small side table tucked near the hallway to the restrooms, and there it was. A single place setting. A paper napkin with my name scratched in blue ink. Everyone else had elegant printed place cards. "You sure this is mine?" I asked, trying not to let my voice crack. "Oh yes," she smiled politely. "Mrs. Hale said this was correct." She turned on her heel before I could answer. I sat down, slowly, adjusting the hem of my dress, already regretting the effort I made. Across the room, Kelly sparkled like a Macy's mannequin, tailored suit, teeth too white, laughter just a little too loud. She waved at someone near the bar, then caught my eye for a split second and turned away like she hadn't seen me. Of course she saw me. As more family members filtered in, the air thickened with the clinking of glasses, the scrape of chairs, and that familiar undercurrent of competition. Real estate wins, Ivy League internships, retirement plans. So luxurious it's almost embarrassing. Everyone had a polished story. I had a paper napkin. The server brought bread. I reached for a slice and overheard Kelly say to Uncle Richard, "Oh, we're still waiting on Lorene. She's probably budgeting parking." He chuckled like it was nothing. That was the thing about Kelly. She knew how to draw blood without making it look like a wound. When the appetizers arrived, I made myself small. Shrimp cocktail, caprese skewers, goat cheese something, I barely touched them. I focused on breathing, staying upright, keeping the quiet in. "Have you been working lately?" my cousin Mara asked. I nodded. "What do you do again?" she added. Her fork paused midair like the answer wasn't worth finishing a bite for. "I'm in property development," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Oh," she blinked. "So like, managing units?" "Something like that." Kelly, 3 chairs away, but always listening, chimed in. "She's being modest. Lorene shows the cutest rent-controlled studios, perfect for starving students." I kept my hands folded in my lap. Dinner came and went. They talked about renovations and hedge funds and trust structures like I didn't exist. I sipped my water and waited for the part where I could leave without looking dramatic. Then the server came by with the dessert menu. Kelly leaned in dramatically, waved it away from our side of the table, and said to the waiter, loud enough for all to hear, "We'll skip dessert on this end. Budget season, right, sis?" Laughter burst like static. Uncle Richard barked. Aunt Susan gave that tight little shake of her head. Even Mom smiled, small, embarrassed, but still there. I stared at the untouched tiramisu across the table. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. I was already full of humiliation. Somehow, I managed to stay seated. The fork in my hand suddenly felt like lead. My eyes burned but didn't betray me. Not here. Not for them. I took one last sip of water, then placed my napkin, my makeshift name card, beside my empty plate. "I'm good," I said to the server when she circled back. "I've had enough for tonight." But I wasn't talking about dessert anymore, as they launched into a toast about Kelly's latest donation to some coastal preservation gala. I let my gaze drift, just for a second. Candlelight shimmered off her diamond earrings, catching the angles of a woman who had everything she ever wanted and nothing she didn't take. I thought about high school. Kelly at the center of her sweet 16, me in a borrowed dress that didn't quite zip up. I remembered her voice as clearly as if it had been yesterday. "She's modest or broke?" And the way people laughed then, too. Except now, I wasn't 15, and I wasn't broke. But they didn't know that, not yet. I pushed back my chair with a soft scrape. "I'll see you all soon," I murmured. No one looked up. Outside, the wind had picked up. I walked to my car without checking my reflection, No one follows a woman like me out of a room like that. Not when they've decided she doesn't belong. But I wasn't chasing a seat at their table anymore. I was building my own. After I pulled out of the parking lot, I didn't drive straight home. I found a 24-hour gas station, parked beneath a flickering light, and sat with the engine running. I don't know why. Maybe to let the weight of the night settle somewhere besides my chest. Maybe to remind myself I still had the keys to more than just my car. The following evening, I got a text from Mara. "Mom's dinner was great. Hope you're coming to Saturday's gathering. Kelly's got a surprise planned for Kate." A smiley face followed. I stared at the screen for a while before tossing the phone on the couch. My appetite hadn't come back, but my memory had. By the time Saturday rolled around, I'd resolved to show up. Not to smile, not to forget, just to watch. It was held at Kelly's house this time. Her backyard patio was strung with market lights, glowing warm against the early spring dusk. Someone handed me a glass of champagne, and I nodded politely, finding my way to the edge of the crowd. I scanned for my mother. She was there, of course, seated front and center, as always, draped in a pastel shawl, like she was waiting for a portrait artist to arrive. Kelly stood beside her, one hand resting theatrically on her shoulder. "Before dessert," she said, raising her voice just enough, "we have a little something for our wonderful mother." The crowd hushed with rehearsed anticipation. Kelly gestured, and Daniel, her husband, stepped forward holding a silver gift bag. Inside was a beautifully framed document, a deed. The deed to a slice of Oregon woodland near the coast, a patch of green my mother had visited every year since I was 10. She called it her retreat for the soul. Applause erupted. Someone said, "How thoughtful," and another followed. Only Kelly would remember such a thing. As people leaned in to read the gift tag, I already knew what it would say. From Kelly, Daniel, and the Hale family. Not a mention of me, even though the purchase had been mine. Quietly, months ago. I had found the land, negotiated the price, filed the paperwork, paid for it in full, and instructed the seller to gift wrap the deed and send it through Kelly at my mother's request. Kelly hadn't added a cent, but she had removed something. My name. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just took another sip of champagne, which suddenly tasted like ash. Later, as the guests moved toward the buffet, Kelly motioned me over to introduce me to a few of Daniel's relatives from Bend. "This is my baby sister, Lorene," she said with the same smile you'd give a stray cat before putting it back outside. "She's still figuring out her path, one of the freest spirits I know." They chuckled gently, like they were in on some private joke. An older woman said, "It's good to have a dreamer in every family. Keeps the rest of us grounded." I nodded. "Sure does." The laughter faded into background noise. No one asked me what I did. No one asked me anything at all. Conversations swirled around foundation endowments, a cousin's winery expansion, someone's vacation home in Big Sur. Every time I opened my mouth, someone else spoke louder. It wasn't personal. That was the problem. I was used to it. Being spoken over, being described instead of being heard. It didn't hurt like it used to. It burned differently now, like a match being held too long. I excused myself halfway through dessert and stepped inside the house. I needed a moment to breathe, to stop clenching my teeth. In the hallway, I passed a shelf filled with family photos. Every frame showcased Kelly, at her graduation, her wedding, next to our mother in matching blazers at some benefit gala. My face appeared twice, once as a toddler on a tricycle, once blurry in the background of a Thanksgiving shot from 10 years ago. A ghost in my own lineage. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't take the frame and smash it, though I thought about it. Instead, I went home. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sat at the dining table. I opened the locked drawer and pulled out the manila folder labeled Pine Hollow Transfer of Ownership. My signature was crisp. My account number was clear. The final payment receipt, stapled neatly behind the deed, bore the date and wire ID. My initials were in the bottom corner. My name was there when it mattered, I whispered. They just didn't want it seen. I turned on the lamp, adjusted the angle of the chair, and began to highlight dates. I opened my laptop, scanned copies into a backup folder, and labeled each document precisely. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about keeping the record straight. Because stories, once told often enough without interruption, become truth. And I wasn't about to let them write mine out again. I didn't call anyone that night, didn't post a cryptic quote on social media. I simply worked, quietly, methodically, like a woman planting seeds. Let them toast to themselves, let them erase me from gift tags and table seats. They had no idea what I was preserving. Morning came slow, gray, and damp like most mornings in Portland. I stood at my kitchen counter, stirring instant oatmeal, staring through the steam at the blinking cursor on my laptop. Beside it, the folder lay open where I'd left it the night before. Highlighted lines, marked pages, a story no one knew but everyone had benefited from. As the oatmeal thickened, I pulled out an old shoebox from the hall closet. One that still had tape from 3 moves ago. It held old photos, scribbled notes from college, and a few folded pieces of paper I hadn't touched in years. At the bottom was what I was looking for. A copy of the graduation speech I'd written when I was 21. I had been selected as the student speaker, something only 2 people in our department ever remembered each year. My professors were thrilled. I was proud. But I never gave that speech. The same week, Kelly announced her engagement. My mother called me the night before the ceremony. "You're going to talk about your life, your goals, all those things you've worked for, and I'm proud of you, baby. But this weekend is about your sister. She's waited so long for this moment. Don't take the light off her." I hadn't even fought it. I told the dean I was sick. Sat in the audience in a dull blue dress while someone else read their mediocre essay about campus nostalgia. My mother had applauded, loudly. And Kelly, she'd kissed her fiancé and said, "See? Everything works out when we support each other." The oatmeal was cold by then. I dropped the spoon in the sink and went to my desk. I opened the document labeled Woodland Deed Timeline and began typing. Monday, site scouting. Wednesday, broker contact, price negotiation. Following week, full payment wire, filed under my name, gifted through Kelly, per request. Each line was simple, just facts. But with each one, the tightness in my chest loosened a notch. Around 11 a.m., my phone rang. I didn't check the screen. Only one person still called without texting first. "Hey, sweet pea," my mother chirped when I answered. "Hi," I said, not bothering to sit. "Kelly told me you were at the dinner. I'm glad. It meant so much to her, and to me." I said nothing. "She's getting a lot of press for that Woodland thing. Isn't it amazing what she's doing for the environment? And for my birthday, no less." I could practically hear the pearls clinking against her neck when she laughed. It wasn't a harsh sound. My mother's voice never was. That's what made it so effective. "You know how she gets, Lorene," she added lightly. "Don't stir things. You've always been stronger." There was a long pause. "She didn't mean anything by forgetting your name. Let her have her moment, okay? Don't hurt your sister." My fingers were tight around the phone. I had to remind myself to breathe through my nose. "She erased me, Mom," I said slowly. "That wasn't an accident." A small sigh. "You girls are both so different, and you've always had such strong feelings. But this is her path, her light. There's no need to make it about you." She didn't say it cruelly. That was the worst part. After we hung up, I sat by the window, letting the light fall in patches across the floor. I remembered other conversations just like that one. Quiet dismissals, gentle redirects. The unspoken rule, don't speak louder than Kelly's presence. I stood and went to the bathroom, faced the mirror. My reflection looked back with no expression, but my eyes were alive, sharp, tired, but awake in a way they hadn't been in years. I picked up my notebook and began a new page. Charity Gala, 2018. My presentation pitch, rejected. Kelly used the phrase word for word in her speech 3 weeks later. Grant for Small Businesses, 2019. My draft emailed to Mom. Kelly announced her plan at family brunch the following Sunday. I didn't need to yell. I needed to write. In the quiet, I heard my own voice for the first time, not trembling, not seeking approval, just mine. That night I found myself thinking about the last time I had tried to assert something, anything. It had been 5 years ago, at a charity dinner. I had offered to speak for a minute about our local food pantry. Kelly had been there too, in a red satin dress, talking to a board member about her new boutique opening. The host handed me the mic. I barely got 3 sentences out before Kelly waved over the same board member and started talking about a donation. I paused, waited. She didn't stop. And under the table, my mother's hand squeezed mine. Not for comfort, but as a signal. Stop. This isn't your moment. So I stopped. I handed the mic back, smiled like a good daughter should, but I never spoke again at any family gathering, until now. This time I wasn't going to whisper politely while being erased. I was going to write it down and make them read it. 2 days later, I showed up at the gallery. I hadn't RSVP'd. I didn't need to. Years ago, I helped secure the funding for the very building the event was held in, quietly, without a speech or plaque. The architect knew, the city knew, but my name never made it to the donor wall. I parked 2 blocks away, walked slowly under a gray Portland dusk, and stepped into the space like I belonged there, because I did. I didn't wear anything flashy, just a dark, well-fitted blazer, flats, and a sense of stillness I hadn't felt in years. Inside, everything looked curated. Reclaimed wood floors, track lighting angled just right, art that whispered authenticity with a 5-digit price tag. And in the center of it all, Kelly, laughing, glowing, floating between clusters of donors and local influencers, like she owned the air they breathed. I was sipping from a glass of water near the back wall, watching a guest examine a series of abstract pieces, when I heard a low voice beside me. "You're Lorene, right?" I turned. The man was in his 70s, sharp navy suit, eyes like someone who'd signed more checks than contracts. His name tag read, Alvin Graves. "I thought so." He nodded. "You're the one who actually backed the Alder project, that little infill development on Glisson?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" He chuckled, not unkindly. "Kelly always talks like it was her baby, but I pulled public records. It's your signature on every equity document. Quiet money, but real money." He clinked his glass against mine gently. "Smart play, by the way. That corner's going to triple in value by 2026. He moved on before I could respond. I stood still. All I could hear was the hum of distant laughter and my pulse in my ears. Someone had seen it, seen me, without me having to scream, or prove, or beg. That moment alone would have been enough. But the universe, or something crueler, wasn't done. Near the bar, I was reaching for a napkin when a woman in a satin blouse and high-heeled boots turned toward me. "So what do you even do, Lorene?" she asked, casual as if we were comparing appetizers. "I mean, you always seem adjacent to things, like around, but not really in it." I looked at her. She wasn't being vicious, just honest, or maybe parroting what she'd been told. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. And then Kelly appeared at her side, draped in soft beige and gold. Not once did her eyes meet mine. She looked right through me and said to the woman, "Oh, Lorene's a free spirit. She does all kinds of behind-the-scenes stuff. She's great at supporting." I held the napkin a beat longer than necessary. "Right," the woman nodded, sipping her drink. "That makes sense?" No one asked another question. Later, after people began heading to valet or calling Ubers, I walked out the side door and circled around the building. I didn't want to be seen leaving beside Kelly. I wasn't part of her act. By the time I got home, I was out of breath, but not from walking. I turned on my desk lamp, pulled out my laptop, and logged into the private server where I stored everything, Westwind assets. A system I built from scratch, without anyone's help or knowledge. I ran my own audits, tracked my own property trails. And just like Alvin had said, Kelly's charities were nothing more than branded facades. Legally, the LLCs belonged to her, but the capital came from my accounts, silent investments, strategic partnerships where she was the face, and I was the risk. I printed 5 pages and laid them out on the dining table like puzzle pieces. Ashcroft Commons, Harborview Green, Alder Project. Each had one common note: initial funding by L.T. Morgan. My name, my money. She'd taken the credit and left me the liability. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just filed every document into a binder marked, "if needed." Let them keep talking. They didn't know the storm was already named. I was just waiting for the wind to shift. I turned off the lamp and walked into the kitchen for a glass of water. From the window, I could still see the glow of the city, the gallery a faint blur in the distance. I'd been erased in plain sight, but strangers were now whispering the truth that my own family had buried for years. And those whispers? They were louder than any speech I never gave. I was heading for the door to get ready for bed when my phone buzzed. A text. From Kelly. Don't get dramatic. Tonight wasn't about you. Try not to repeat history. No greeting, no punctuation. I stared at it for a long moment, and then, as if I were watching a rerun of a very tired show, I remembered the last time she'd used that phrase. I'd brought a guest to a family barbecue, someone I'd been quietly seeing. Kelly had pulled me aside and hissed, "Don't make this a thing. Don't get dramatic." I had laughed it off back then. Now I typed back, "You're right. Tonight wasn't about me, but the next one will be." I didn't wait for a reply. And when I heard her heels later at the valet line, yes, we parked at the same gallery deck, I didn't step aside. She walked past me without pause, then hesitated, turned her head slightly. "Try not to make this a habit, Lorene. You've done enough of that in the past." Her tone was airy, practiced, meant to sting without leaving a visible mark. I didn't flinch, just looked at her and smiled, the kind that doesn't move past the mouth. "I'm just getting started." She walked off. But this time, the silence I held wasn't surrender. It was preparation. The drive home was silent, except for the click of my turn signals. Portland's streets were mostly empty at that hour, and so was I, on the surface. But something had shifted. My thoughts were sharper now, not spinning, focused. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes, poured myself half a glass of wine, and turned on the desk lamp. I pulled out the binder I'd started earlier that week and added a fresh tab, reassignments. It only took 15 minutes to find what I needed. A scanned PDF, property transfer, 6 months old, tied to a mixed-use lot I had personally funded and registered under the Morgan family's development fund, a line item in the shared holdings, or so I'd been told. But the name on the latest deed? West Bay Properties LLC, managed by Kelly Morgan. No notice, no consent form, and certainly no vote. I double-checked the original agreement from 3 years back. My name was listed as co-founding trustee. Kate's signature was there too, albeit shakier than I remembered. I zoomed in, comparing strokes. The new document showed a nearly identical signature, but the formation date was off by a week, and the notary seal looked digitally pasted. There it was. Either my mother had signed something without understanding it, or Kelly had helped herself to something that didn't belong to her. Again. I leaned back in my chair, closed the laptop, and stared at the ceiling. The numbers didn't lie. They never did. They didn't care about feelings or family brunches or not making things a scene. They just told the truth. I folded the 2 documents and slid them into a plain manila envelope. Not to mail, just to hold. Sometimes evidence needs to breathe a little before it speaks. 2 days later, I showed up to brunch at Kate's house. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. The garden looked the same. Perfectly trimmed roses, stone pathway curved like an apology no one ever says aloud. Kelly was already there, in pastel and pearls, pouring mimosas like she ran the place. I walked over to her while she was alone near the peonies. "Got a minute?" I asked. She turned, that polite civil smile already forming. "Of course." I handed her the envelope. She didn't open it. "That's the original ownership doc from the Fremont lot," I said, voice steady. "And the reassignment paperwork you filed 6 months ago." Still no reaction. "I just want to be clear," I continued. "Either you forged Mom's signature, or she signed something she didn't understand. I'm not accusing. I'm pointing out that one of those things happened." Kelly blinked slowly. "Are we really doing this? Here?" "No, you did this. I'm just choosing not to let it rot in silence." She looked away for a second too long, then back. "You always think people are trying to hurt you." I didn't rise to it. "If this isn't reversed by next Friday, I won't be quiet next time. I'll bring the file where it belongs." "Where's that?" she asked, suddenly more clipped. "The county office," I said. "Or the press. Depends who answers first." I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned and walked back to the table, smiled at Aunt Doreen, and passed the fruit platter like nothing had happened. That evening, back home again, I went deeper. Old tax documents, archived emails, the family trust files I hadn't touched in years. And there it was. A trust fund, formed under my name, my social, titled Morgan Emergency Holding Account, established 12 years ago, supposedly for mutual family support. The only deposits came from me. The only withdrawals? Kelly. For startup development, travel consulting, health investment, cute labels for what were essentially lifestyle upgrades. I wasn't just being excluded, I'd been financing the exclusion. I closed every account tied to the trust. The next morning I sent one email. Just one, no lengthy intro, just a subject line, correction or disclosure. The attachment was a spreadsheet, clean, simple, color-coded. One tab, line 14, column D, projected legal exposure, misappropriation of family-held funds. Kelly didn't reply. Kate didn't either. But I didn't need them to. I wasn't trying to win their approval anymore. I was issuing a warning, one they'd understand in their language. Documents, risk, public image. This wasn't about getting back what I'd lost. It was about ending the illusion that they could keep taking without consequence. If they still thought I wouldn't go public, they misunderstood the version of me that walked out of their garden. By midweek, I had gone 3 days without a response. No calls, no emails. Not from Kelly, not from Kate. Silence. The same old strategy. They'd use it like a shield and hope I got tired of shouting into the void. But that morning, while folding laundry with the TV humming in the background, a familiar name pulled me toward the screen. Up next, the anchor smiled, how one Portland entrepreneur is reviving neglected neighborhoods and community spirits with pastries and purpose. I stopped mid-fold, and there she was, Kelly, standing in a bright apron beside a community center kitchen counter, handing out neat rows of baked goods to smiling kids. My strawberry tarragon scones lined the trays, cut precisely in the same shape I always used, a design I had tested, perfected, and shared only in one place, my home kitchen. The segment zoomed in as she placed the last scone into a paper box. Kelly Hale, founder and project lead, the voiceover announced. The banner below read, Reviving Portland, one pastry at a time. Not a word about me. I didn't need to hear the rest. I muted the television. Instead of yelling or texting or marching down to the station, I logged in. I had kept my firm's social presence minimal on purpose. West Wind Properties wasn't designed to shout. It was structured to build. But now it was time to raise its voice, not in anger, in facts. The post I drafted was simple. 3 clean slides. Slide 1, a scanned property title, my name bolded, Kelly's absent. Slide 2, the original community redevelopment plan, with my signature at the bottom. Slide 3, a still shot from my kitchen security cam from 2 years ago, time-stamped, showing me baking those scones. Same shape, same glaze. Caption, Legacy is built, not borrowed. I hit publish. I didn't check the numbers, I didn't monitor shares, I didn't even scroll the comments. But within the hour, an old contact from the planning board messaged me. Saw your post, about time someone cleared the air. That afternoon the phone rang. Kate. Her voice was clipped. What are you doing? Correcting the record, I said evenly. You're making this ugly. No, I'm making it honest. There was a pause, too long to be accidental. You know how these things work, Lorene. People start digging, and you don't come out clean either. That made me laugh. I didn't spend 10 years hiding my fingerprints from what I built. She did. You'll ruin everything. Everything I didn't build? Let it burn. I ended the call. Later that evening, I drove to a strip mall on the east side. Most people would pass it without a second glance. A laundry shop, a tax office, a nail salon. But tucked in the corner was a tiny storefront with windows still taped from when I first leased it years ago for a pop-up event. It had been the first place I tested my pastries for community distribution. I'd let it go dormant. Until now. I reopened it for one day only. A charity bake sale. Everything priced at whatever people could afford. Proceeds to go directly to a tenant protection fund Kelly once bragged about spearheading. There were no fancy banners, no PR agents, no mimosas. Just folding tables, handwritten signs, and the smell of real vanilla and brown butter. The first hour was quiet. Then a few faces trickled in, then more. Near closing, a little girl stood at the counter holding a scone with both hands. These taste like the ones on TV, she said. I smiled. They are, I told her. You just never saw who baked them. A soft round of claps rose from behind her. A few customers nodded. One man slipped a 20 into the donation jar without taking change. It wasn't a crowd, but it was a beginning. And as I locked up, my phone buzzed again. 2 notifications. 1. A repost of my original slides by a local nonprofit, tagging both my firm and Kelly's handle. 2. A message from one of Kelly's key donors. Would love to meet the actual developer behind Ashcroft. Let's talk. They pretended I didn't exist, but now their donors were asking who really did the work. By the following afternoon, the message from Kelly's donor was still sitting unread in my inbox, flagged but unopened. I didn't need to rush. Timing, I'd learned, was everything. That evening, as Portland's skies shifted from gold to pewter, another envelope arrived. Hand-delivered, no return address. Just my name on heavy cream cardstock. The kind Kelly liked to use when she wanted to appear more polished than she actually was. Inside, an invitation to the Ashcroft Renewal ribbon-cutting ceremony. Officially, I wasn't listed as part of the program. Unofficially, they'd already lost control of the guest list. The event was set up in front of one of the newly painted community centers, the same one Kelly had walked through on TV. The sidewalk had been swept, flowers freshly planted. Rows of chairs faced a small stage with a podium and banner, building Portland together. I arrived 10 minutes before it began, dressed in dark gray slacks, a tucked-in blouse, no jewelry. Not because I wanted to blend in, but because I didn't need a spotlight to be seen anymore. Kelly took the stage in a pearl-colored suit, her makeup flawless, her smile tighter than usual. Flashbulbs popped, donors leaned forward, local council members clapped as she began. "This project is more than redevelopment," she said smoothly. "It's about lifting up areas long overlooked. You can't leave families stuck in places like Alder Street." A few heads turned. A few more chuckled politely. I didn't. Alder Street, where I lived, where I invested, where I had built something when no one else would. Kelly's words weren't random. They were surgical. She wanted the audience to hear low income and think not me. I didn't flinch. But the woman next to me, a staffer from the city housing department, raised an eyebrow. 2 minutes later, a man in a navy vest from a local nonprofit leaned across the back row and whispered to a reporter, handing him a single page. The journalist scanned it, then did a double take. The paper showed the primary equity breakdown for Ashcroft Renewal. Line 1, West Pine Holdings, 76%. Line 2, LLC owner, L. Hale. No mention of Kelly anywhere in the legal filings. The reporter leaned toward his cameraman, who began adjusting his angle. Kelly continued, unaware. "We were inspired to create a model that not only renovates, but preserves community identity. Because home isn't just a place, it's people." As she wrapped up, the applause sounded slightly offbeat. The claps weren't synchronized. Something had shifted. "Kelly," the reporter called from stage left, "can you clarify the role of West Pine Holdings in this project?" Her jaw moved, but only her bottom lip twitched. "We've always collaborated with firms aligned in values," she said, blinking twice too quickly. "Was your sister one of them?" Kelly's head tilted, just barely. Her voice came out warm, practiced. "She's always been supportive in her own way. I didn't walk toward the stage. I walked toward the man from the nonprofit. We shook hands. "Would you be willing to answer a few questions?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Let's step out of the noise." We sat down at a folding table under a canopy just outside the perimeter of the main crowd. A small community blog had sent a contributor. Young, serious, wearing a press badge made on a home printer. I didn't grandstand. I didn't vent. I walked him through the timeline, the filings, the development phases, the partnerships that never got named. I showed copies of permits, my permits. I let him record me, saying clearly, I didn't need to be the face, I just wanted to protect the foundation. When he asked if I felt betrayed, I said, I used to think truth would rise on its own, but sometimes you have to put it on paper and hand it to someone. As we wrapped up, the city housing staffer who had sat next to me earlier approached. "Smart play," she said. "What do you mean?" "Letting her say it first," she replied. "People don't forget who tried to own something that wasn't theirs." By the time I got home, the article had already been posted. Headline: Meet the quiet developer behind Portland's most talked about renewal project. I didn't share it. I didn't need to. Others did. Dozens of reposts. Comments from people I hadn't heard from in years. She's the one who helped my aunt stay in her apartment. I knew it. I saw her working with the survey crew last spring. She doesn't brag. She builds. None of them said my name out loud, but they didn't have to. Kelly wanted the spotlight, but she forgot that the foundation carries the weight. And I built it. I didn't reply to the article. I didn't need to. That night, the repost spoke louder than any caption could, and when the third invitation came, this time from the Ashcroft Renewal Advisory Committee, it wasn't dressed in gold foil edges or followed by polite, "Hope to see you" texts from Kelly. It came through a secure email from the committee's office. Subject line: Agenda Item 3C, Contributor Clarification. Attached was a scanned seating chart for a boardroom downtown. Not a party, not a celebration, a reckoning. I arrived just after 9 a.m. The building's glass facade glared back at me, tall and clinical. Inside, I was directed to the 14th floor, where a long rectangular table faced a projection screen and a tray of untouched pastries. Kelly was already seated at one end, flanked by 2 donors and a PR rep. Kate sat farther down, in a navy blouse I remembered from a fundraiser 5 years ago, the one she'd asked me not to attend. No one stood when I entered. I didn't expect them to. I nodded once and took the open seat directly across from Kelly. I placed a single leather folder on the table. Then I waited. The chairwoman cleared her throat. We'd like to open this meeting by reviewing the authorship of a recent publication tied to the Ashcroft renewal. Kelly folded her hands. I believe this is just a misunderstanding, she began. I slid the first document out, quietly, no grand gesture, no voice raised. I believe you'll find the misunderstanding was printed in Portland Weekly, under the byline Kelly Hale. The article? Word for word from a draft I submitted to a grant proposal archive 3 years ago. I passed around both papers, one stamped with the Library of Congress copyright filing. The other? A copy of the glossy feature with Kelly's smile taking up the top right corner. The room fell into a stuttered silence. One of the board members coughed into his fist. A legal aide adjusted her glasses. Kelly opened her mouth. I didn't wait. This wasn't about inspiration, I said, calm and precise. It was theft, of authorship, of narrative, of identity. Kate finally spoke softly. Lorene, maybe this isn't the... This is exactly the place, I said, turning toward her. Because every other place, every other table, you've told me it wasn't. My voice didn't rise. If anything, it lowered. I'm not angry she wanted to write something. I'm angry she keeps rewriting who I am. The PR rep whispered something into a phone. I gave them 10 seconds. Then I opened the final flap of the folder and pulled out a contract, not a summary. The actual binding document from the redevelopment purchase. Land title, banking logs, wire transfers, LLC filings, all tied to me. I placed it at the center of the table. This, I said, isn't a request for credit. It's a return to accuracy. Kelly shifted back, face unreadable. Kate stared at the folder but didn't touch it. One of the younger donors leaned forward. Is this the same property highlighted in our annual report? I nodded. Yes, the numbers check out. I suggest your legal team confirm what your PR team didn't. Another voice piped in from the side of the room. A woman in city planning. I have a copy of the zoning request here, she said, lifting a paper. L. Hale, March 2020. Someone whispered, oh my God. I didn't flinch. Kelly tried again. This wasn't about stealing. We've always shared. Family projects overlap. Then why was I never included in the credits? I asked. Why did the draft I wrote end up with your name on it, published the week after I declined your offer to co-sign your housing bill? No answer. I stood, calm, still. This doesn't need to become anything else. You now have the full truth in print and in hand. What you do next reflects on your integrity, not mine. I looked to Kate one last time. I spent years being told not to embarrass this family, that airing truth would make us look divided. She didn't say a word. So I turned to the board. But I'm not the one who divided us. I just stopped pretending we weren't. And with that, I slid the folder back into my tote, gave a nod, and walked toward the glass doors. No one stopped me. I didn't leave with an award or a plaque, but for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying any weight that wasn't mine. By the time I got home, I didn't need to check the headlines. My phone had already quieted. No new mentions, no more anonymous calls, just stillness. The week that followed unfolded in near silence. Not the kind used to shame, but the kind that settles over a room once the shouting's done. Kelly hadn't posted since the meeting. Her usual cascade of filtered brunch photos and carefully curated charity smiles went dark. Sponsors began peeling away, one after the other. A quiet statement from one foundation cited, "A reevaluation of public alignment with community values." Another simply thanked her for past partnership. I didn't forward the press releases. I didn't comment. Kate, on the other hand, resigned from the community board she'd chaired for over a decade. No dramatic farewell, no televised announcement, just a formal notice sent to the local chapter. Someone forwarded it to me with a, "Thought you'd want to see this." I didn't reply. That same morning, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and sat down at my desk, the same one where I'd filed receipts no one had cared to read. But now, the inbox pinged with messages that got my name right on the first try. From nonprofits, from organizers, from city planners who once waved me off. Now, they wanted input. They wanted me. I didn't grin or cry. I just answered. 3 days later, just after sunset, I heard the knock. Soft, hesitant, 2 short raps. I almost didn't open it, but I did. Kate stood on my porch, hair pulled back, no lipstick, holding a paper bag. It was the same cloth bakery tote I'd once stitched her initials into during a Christmas market nearly 15 years ago. I'd forgotten she even kept it. "I didn't plan what to say," she murmured. "Then don't," I said, stepping aside. "Just come in." We didn't hug. I didn't offer coffee. She didn't ask. We sat on opposite ends of my small couch, watching the porch light flicker over the backyard fence. The paper bag sat unopened between us. The smell of cinnamon and clove leaked from the top. 10 minutes passed, then 15. When she finally looked at me, it wasn't with tears, just something closer to recognition. "You've always been steadier than I gave you credit for," she said. I nodded. "You never had to say it." She nodded back. That was it. No apology, no makeup dinner, but she came. And for someone like Kate, that meant something. A few weeks later, I hosted a gathering, not at a gallery or garden, just in the alley behind the Alder Street complex. There were folding chairs, 2 space heaters, a pot of hot cocoa bubbling on a camp stove. Kids from the building ran around with paper cups of cider. Someone brought tamales wrapped in foil. Someone else, a Bluetooth speaker, playing old soul tracks low enough that conversation still reigned. It wasn't fancy, but it was full. Midway through the evening, a little girl tugged my sleeve. "Is this your house?" she asked, eyes wide. I crouched beside her. "No," I said, smiling. "It's all of ours. I just helped hold the door open." She looked at me for a beat, then ran back toward her friends. No fanfare, just acceptance. Later, I walked up to the top floor of the building, the floor that used to have my name on its lease under a shell LLC no one could trace. From that height, I could see the courtyard, the street, the pop-up tables lit by soft yellow bulbs. It was quiet and full. Back in my office, I opened a blank document. Not a speech, not a press kit, a blueprint, a new community fund, this time for women like Miss Daniels in Unit 2B, who'd worked double shifts after her husband got sick. For moms like Kira who needed childcare vouchers to finish night school. For the girl who asked if I owned the building but didn't need to know the answer. I typed the name of the initiative. Then for the first time I typed my own at the bottom, Lorene Hale. Not bolded, not underlined, just present. For once that was enough. I didn't build it for revenge. I built it so no one would have to fight for a seat ever again. Sometimes the loudest victories don't come with applause. They come in the form of silence, finally free of pretending, of shrinking, of asking permission to exist in spaces we already earned. If there's one thing I've learned through this journey, it's that legacy isn't about recognition. It's about resilience. It's about choosing to tell your story before someone else writes you out of it. So if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, told to keep the peace, while others took credit for your work, know this: your quiet strength holds more power than their noise ever will. And you don't need permission to own your truth. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to reclaim your own story or support someone who did? Let's start a conversation in the comments. Type 1 if this story resonated with you, or just tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if this story didn't speak to you, I'd still love to know why. Your thoughts matter. If you're still here with me, thank you. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and deeply human, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss what's next. We're just getting started.